Namaskar. Students, we'll be moving into our lecture 4, where we will go into the Cold War. That is the post-Second World War history of international relations. Basically, the whole issue of bipolarity. In this period, I will be dealing with 1945 to 1989, the period of the Cold War. Now, how would we define the Cold War? See, what is the difference between a hot war or a real war and a cold war? See, this is a period of hostility where international relations theorists, especially people like Kenneth Waltz and others, and even John Mearsheimer, believe that it was a golden period of peace and tranquility, and this was basically because in the anarchical system you had two major powers and who kept the peace. If you see, there's a period of hostility where you don't see the world going into a third world. The reason you might say, why were the fears? Because please remember, between the First World War and the Second World War, there's just a 20-year gap. And after that, for nearly about 50 years, the world was peaceful. And many people believe it's because of bipolarity. There was a great struggle for power that shaped it, and it was cold in Europe but hot in the Third World. So they fought in smaller wars, but there was no two major war between the two major superpowers. There was more an ideological warfare. It was a period of differences in political ideologies between the supporters of economic and political systems, that is capitalism and liberal democracy, versus the advocates of an alternative of communism and a centralized economic system. Now, what are the characteristics of this period? One, conflict is a norm of global politics, and most realists tell you it exists. Number two, it ushered in the nuclear age. Arms race, arms control, and disarmament. So this period was defined by nuclear weapons. A new type of a weapon, and most of you know that America first got it in 1945. Absence of a major war, long peace, the emergence of two superpowers, the United States of America and the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, or the Soviet Union, as the primary actors in the international system, and decline of Europe as the center. So what do you have basically? Differences surfaced on what? Geopolitical national interests. Having invaded the West several times, USSR used its newfound power to solidify its sphere of influence, especially East Europe. Most of you know, after the Second World War and after the war was over, the Soviet troops stayed in most of the Eastern European states. Basically, the reason was, many people say, what are the causes for this conflict of interest? The Soviet leadership, they wanted friendly, weak states on its western border because it was vital to its national interests. Twice the Soviet Union was attacked from its western borders. Napoleon and then Adolf Hitler. And huge loss of life, especially during the Second World War, when Hitler attacked the Soviet Union. US debated between an aggressive rollback strategy, pushing the USSR back to its own borders, or a less aggressive containment strategy. George Kennan published the famous X-telegram. He was the American ambassador to the Soviet Union, in which he argued that because the USSR would always feel military insecurity, it would conduct an aggressive foreign policy. And containing the Soviets should become the cornerstone of US post-war foreign policy. Now, as the Soviets had their own insecurities, the West also had its own suspicions of the communist Soviet Union. It dates back to 1917, the Bolshevik Revolution. Most of you know that the Bolsheviks came to power after overthrowing the Romanov Tsars, and the entire family also was killed very brutally. The young Soviet state after that, if you remember, Western and Japanese intervention in North Russia and Siberia in the summer of 1918. Woodrow Wilson and his allies had a fundamental hatred or loathing for Bolshevism, and antipathy was mutual because he was a great proponent of liberal democracy. The US did not recognize the communist government of USSR until 1933, meaning literally 16 years after the revolution. Thrown together by Hitler's invasion of the Soviet Union in June 1941 and US entry into the war in December 1941, the two allies continued to harbor suspicions of one another. So history threw them together because Hitler attacked Russia despite Stalin having a treaty with him, and the Japanese attacked the Americans at Pearl Harbor, through which they entered the Second World War. So causes basically mutual distrust. This continued because at the time of the Second World War, they had to come together. With the defeat of the Nazis, the glue that held the alliance together disappeared. You had the Atlantic Charter on August 14, 1941 that called for a collaboration on economic issues and prepared for a permanent system of security. These plans were consolidated in 1943 and 44 and came to fruition in the United Nations in 1945. Several meetings were held to iron out the differences among major powers, the most important of which were held in Yalta in February 1945 and at Potsdam in July-August 1945. Both shaped post-war settlement in Europe and fed the misunderstanding. Now, if you see clearly, Truman and containment. Basically, many people say that the Cold War began with what they call the Truman Doctrine. See, in most of you know that, should know that Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the president or the war president, died in April 1945. His then vice president, Harry S. Truman, became the president of the United States, who was also responsible for throwing the atom bombs on Japan to end the war in the Pacific sphere. And that is very controversial. Many people question the motives and the necessity to throw it. Many people believe that Roosevelt was much more sympathetic towards Joseph Stalin and the Soviet Union, very different from Winston Churchill, whereas Harry Truman, many people say, was much more realistic and he was different from Roosevelt. So if you see clearly, initially what happens in the post-Second World War world, Iran, Turkey and Greece, there are communist parties that come to power, socialist parties, and many people believe that this is the Soviet Union is funding and trying to extend communism into these countries. So the Americans were very worried, and as well as Soviet rejection of the Baruch plan on nuclear weapons. In February 1947, the British government announced that it could no longer afford to finance the Kingdom of Greece in its civil war against the communist-led insurgents because Great Britain's economy was not what it was. The US government responded to this and they said that they will fund all anti-communist forces fighting communism. So that their goal was what? Containment. to stop communism within its borders. Now, what is the Truman Doctrine? Truman delivered a speech calling for the allocation of $400 million to intervene in the war and unveiled the Truman Doctrine, which framed the conflict as a contest between free peoples and totalitarian regimes. American policymakers accused the Soviet Union of conspiring against the Greek royalists in an effort to expand Soviet influence, even though Stalin had told the Communist Party to cooperate with the British-backed government. Many people believe the insurgents were really helped by Tito's Socialist Federal Republic of Yugoslavia against Stalin's wishes. So if you see clearly, many writers of the Cold War believe it was the Truman Doctrine that really heralded the Cold War. It was a political ideological differences that brought it in. With the Cold War, you brought in the idea of spheres of influence, meaning each of the great two superpowers had their own spheres of influence where they were highly sensitive to any intervention that was taking place. It was a geographic region dominated by one major actor, like for example, US in Latin America. South and Central America, America is very sensitive to any other force. Areas of dominant influence for specific countries, for example, the Soviet Union in East Europe, especially Poland and the Balkans. US abandoned the unilateralism much of America's past and sought to keep peace with cooperation among the great powers. And if you see, it started with the 4 policemen as what Franklin Delano Roosevelt said. Now it ended up with only 2 policemen. Russians had the power in Eastern Europe, Yalta and Poland. Then if you remember very well, adding to the Truman Doctrine was also the Winston Churchill's famous word he used for the totalitarian communist East. He called it the Iron Curtain. And he did it when he was talking at a college in Missouri in the US. He described it as the line separating the area in Europe under Soviet control and the free countries in Europe. Again, very similar ideology. And if you see, this is what, and he blamed the Soviet Union and its desire for ideological and political expansion for the emerging East-West conflict. Then the concept comes in Red Terror, Red Peril, and communist fifth columns that are established to complete the unity and absolute obedience to the communist center. So he thought that this Iron Curtain was such a force against which independent countries will have to come together. Please understand, from an international relations point of view, this was bipolarity, a political system or an international order where you had 2 centers of power. The former great powers were devastated. For example, Germany, Italy, and Japan were in ruins, who were the Axis powers. Germany was divided and occupied by the victors, West Germany and West Berlin with the West, and East Germany and East Berlin, a communist country. And Japan was occupied by American armed forces. Douglas MacArthur. Europe's winners and losers were all heavily in debt. France, Germany, England, all of them. And all in varying degrees needed US assistance to meet basic demands. So politically too, Europe was in shambles. Governments politically were unstable and economically ruined after 2 wars so close to each other. Now this bipolarity, what did it bring in? If you see, to US accounted for 45% of the world's manufacturing, and it enjoyed large trade surpluses and huge gold reserves. So indeed, American military might was at its peak. Its armies occupied Western Europe and Japan. Its navy was the world's largest, and its monopoly on a new revolutionary weapon, the atom bomb. USSR bore the brunt of the war against Germany, suffering more than 20 million dead. Politically, Joseph Stalin's regime survived the Nazi onslaught. USSR as one of the victors and with 175 divisions remained in the heart of Europe, demobilizing US forces in Europe, expected to share the spoils of the World War. The reason of the Soviet Union and Stalin was, we suffered, we fought the war, and why can't we have also a pie in the victory? So if you see, one of the historians calls this bipolar system an empire by invitation, because he says both the two superpowers were really not ready to take on the global leadership. Most of you know during the League of Nations, they did not. Though they were the emerging powers, but they did not. So here if you see very clearly, he says the global leadership suddenly was handed over to the Soviet Union and the United States, neither of which had the experience in global politics. There he's slightly wrong, because Russia was always part of the earlier balance of power. US and USSR found themselves possessing what the Norwegian historian Geir Lundstad called to take the empire by invitation. It did not take long before misunderstandings started, and as soon as Yalta and Potsdam were over by 1947, there was strain in East-West relations. Now please remember, what were the Yalta axioms? Most of you see the belief that the US leaders before the Cold War that it was possible to bargain with the Soviet Union. And the USSR was much like other states that designed foreign policies based on power. This was the Rooseveltian understanding of the Soviet Union. The Soviet fait accompli, while increasing Soviet security, reduced the prospects of fruitful bargaining and disagreement on the boundary question. Despite its defeat, Germany remained the key to European security. In its strategic geographic position, highly trained population and economic potential made it the focus of both Western and Soviet concerns. And many people say that was the reason that they divided Germany. The Riga Axioms. The Riga Axioms is by a Soviet historian, Daniel Ergin. He says the Soviet Union does not run its foreign policy on power. It runs it on Marxist-Leninist ideology. What does that make it? One, he says, it's a totalitarian structure, the Communist Party. See, we can, this is a very good assessment that we can even put for China today. Combined with its ideological fervor, doctrine and ideology, and a spirit of innate aggressiveness shaped Soviet policy. The USSR was committed to world revolution and unlimited expansion. So there was a mirror image. Soviet leaders also saw the US as driven by capitalist imperatives and bent on world domination. Each side demonized the other as expansionist while assigning benevolent motives to oneself. So the othering happens here. Now with it, what comes in is in international relations, this period brought in was what was called security dilemma. The inability of these actors under conditions of anarchy, which is part of the structure of international relations, to trust each other. The fear of aggression created the growth of military power. So arms race, you know, nuclear weapons, 1945. Only the Soviet Union possessed, and only US possessed, and it used it over Japan to get its surrender. There was a power vacuum in Central Europe and East Asia. So neither wanted the other to enjoy a preponderance of power. So they formed alliances, and thereby maintaining a balance of power. And Russia always wanted warm water ports and defensible boundaries. And it always feared capitalist encirclement and Western imperialism. Now containment, as I told you with the Truman Doctrine, it comes in. And US foreign policy also, if you see this period, what was it? The US must be willing to help free people to maintain their free institutions. So free people versus so-called totalitarian regimes. Then the US use of espionage, the KGB versus the CIA. Economic pressure and forward deployed military sources. Soviets blocked Berlin. US and allies had to carry out airlift. And if most of you know that in 1949, two important things take place. The Soviet Union gets its atomic bomb, and communists under Mao Zedong take over a very large country in Asia, that is the People's Republic of China. Another important characteristic of the Cold War is its alliance system. Established the United States after containment, established what is called the NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization in 1949. The ANZUS in 1951, CENTO in 1954, and SEATO also in 1950. The Russian and the Communists formed the Warsaw Pact in 1955. Then you had the Marshall Plan, named after the US Secretary of State George C. Marshall, that poverty and despair has to be addressed. So there was a huge economic funding and help that was given to countries of Western Europe and allies in the NATO to rebuild with economic assistance, and if possible to attract countries from the Soviet umbrella or the behind the Iron Curtain. A very important thing that takes place is the Berlin blockade in 1961, and after that the East-West confrontation. Usually they decided that to avoid any direct resort to arms. Now there is a series of confrontations that do take place. It's not that it's absolutely peaceful, but there was no major war that threatened the system, like the First World War and the Second World War. See, loss of China intensified a climate of fear and hysteria about alleged communist infiltration of American institutions that was called McCarthyism, and literally many people were hunted, not only in Hollywood but everywhere, in the name of Red Terror. 1950 to 53, you have the Korean War. Most of you know this was a fight between a communist North Korea towards free South Korea, the 39th parallel, and this militarized the Cold War in both Asia and Europe and transformed a regional struggle into a global one. Today also, most of you know that Korea is a very important flashpoint in today's politics also. It ended in a ceasefire, but a treaty officially ending the war has never been signed. And Korea has never been signed and remains the most dangerous flashpoint. Then you have the Uniting for Peace resolution, and most of you know in 1950 that was the first and the last time during the Cold War when all the United Nations could act, and that was because of the Soviet absented itself. Its veto. It thought even if it's absent itself, it's a veto, but it was not so. Then 1953, the end of Joseph Stalin, he dies, and then he's taken over by many moderate Nikita Khrushchev. I know there are also a series of confrontations in that period. 1954-55, you have the Taiwan Strait crisis, when the nationalists ran away to Taiwan and China wanted to occupy. So the American forces come in there. 1956, most of you know, that the Suez Canal crisis, President Nasser took over the Suez Canal and did not want to give permission to Israel. So the Israel and France and England attacked Egypt. Russia came to the support of Egypt. And if you know, then United States of America played an honest broker. The Hungarian crisis, when the Russian troops went into Hungary, when there was a reformist type of a movement, they didn't want it to fall out of their influence. 1957, most of you know, in the space war, Russia goes, Soviets go ahead. They launch the satellite Sputnik, which causes anxiety in the West and catalyzing superpower scientific competition. The first man in space goes in 1961. Again, the Soviet Union goes ahead with Yuri Gagarin. And in 1963, they send a woman into space, Valentina Tereshkova. 1960-63, you have the Congo crisis. Patrice Lumumba is killed, and UN action to fill the vacuum, and so is the UN Secretary General, charismatic UN Secretary General Dag Hammarskjöld. Again, this is a conflict between two ideologies, and in 1962 you had the point at which literally they would have gone to a nuclear war or the Third World War, the Cuban Missile Crisis. Most of you should know that in 1959, Cuba is a small island about 550 miles off the coast of Florida. The revolution takes place where communist guerrillas of Che Guevara and Fidel Castro Ruz take over government. After that, the American CIA tried to kill these two leaders and take over power. They didn't succeed. So in 1962, Fidel Castro invites the Soviets, and the Soviets plays SS-20s. They are nuclear systems in Cuba, which brings the US, and US is threatened so closely by nuclear weapons. Luckily, due to Kennedy and John Kennedy and Khrushchev, they do a brinkmanship, meaning they go to the brink, but they don't jump off. They agree for an agreement where the Americans promise not to destabilize the Castro government, and the Russians agree to remove their nuclear weapons from Cuba. Then 1962, again, you have the Sino-Indian War, where China's expansionism begins. And unfortunately, had India at least even taken it to the United Nations, it may have made a difference. China occupies the large territory of Tibet. And most of you know that India does not even bleat like a lamb, though Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel did say that this is dangerous because next the Chinese would be at India's door, which became very true. Till today, we don't have a delineated border, and we are still fighting the Chinese expansionists. 1959, the Dalai Lama flees to India during the Tibetan uprising. He appears in Darjeeling, and Dr. B.C. Roy, the then Chief Minister of West Bengal, brings him, and literally many people say it is B.C. Roy who tells Nehru that he should give him asylum as head of state. Now, if you see, you have conflict, confrontation, and compromise. See, so it is a period where you see different negotiating skills coming about between two superpowers. The Vietnam War of 1965 to 76 is a turning point because the US sought to resist the reunification of Vietnam under the communist government of Ho Chi Minh. But US lost very badly. It was a people's war and it was guerrilla tactics. 1960, most of you know, Gary Power incident. America used to have this U-2 planes which used to do spying activity, intelligence gathering, and they were shot over the Soviet Union. And most of you know that Khrushchev literally took out his boot and hit it at Paris to show the anger to the Western media that how America was trying to infiltrate and do spying within the Soviet Union. 1970s, you had the détente, which believed that talking leads to resolving, so that lessen tensions to avoid nuclear crisis. So you have the hotline agreement between the two superpowers. Then you have rapprochement in 1973, US-China Pakistan axis, especially during Richard Nixon and Henry Kissinger's period, though the Americans today are rethinking about this whole rapprochement with their US-China relations more or less at the lowest. US has closed the Houston consulate, and so has China done in retaliation the Chengdu consulate of the US. Then you have Ostpolitik, where German Chancellor Willy Brandt recognized East Germany's sovereignty and peculiar status of Berlin. Now, how did the system succeed? There were certain unwritten rules which both the superpowers practiced. One, avoid direct military confrontation. That is, US and Soviet Union, they sought to it, but they were very careful that they did not hit each other directly. Yes, they used proxies, they used substitutes, they did shadow boxing. There are several incidents where each informed the other. It was very clear that they never wanted a direct conflict. Second, design weapon systems that could survive an enemy attack and deploy surveillance systems, especially satellites, to make surprise attacks unlikely. So if you see, they went into a lot of armament talks through which they designed weapons, and they were very careful. They second strike capability and all that. Avoid tampering directly within the adversary's sphere of influence. Meaning Hungary, Czechoslovakia, you don't have the Americans interfering, nor when the Americans went into Grenada, Haiti, or any of it, nor did the Soviet Union intervene. Engage in non-military contests, including propaganda, espionage, subversion, overt and covert, economic, political, military assistance, and other techniques of informal penetration. Engage in, if you see, competition and struggles for prestige, especially scientific, space. Improve direct communication. If you see, both of them improve direct communication, the hotline agreement, then the summit meetings between the two superpowers. Now, within the Cold War, many people believe that détente broke down in 1979. 1979 is a very important year. Why? Two major events take place that greatly shake the United States of America. One is 1979, when Islamists took over Iran, a very major linchpin of American foreign policy in West Asia, or what they call the Middle East. The Shah of Iran was overthrown, and the Islamists under Ayatollah Khomeini take over. And what hit America hard was the US embassy hostage crisis, where the US literally could do nothing, and President Carter lost the election due to this. And the other was in the December of 1979, the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan under the Brezhnev Doctrine. Many people believe the Soviet Union says that it was invitation and we did it on the basis of Brezhnev Doctrine. What was the Brezhnev Doctrine? That like-minded governments anywhere in crisis should be helped. The Russian version of this is it was an invitation. There was already the Communist Party of Afghanistan, which even Zizek praises, was a party that was in power, like Babrak Karmal, Taraki and others, and it was in crisis. So the Soviet troops went in to support the Communist Party of Afghanistan. So you have two different, but Americans saw this as America being cut off to the oil supply route of, you have Iran, if you see the map, and Afghanistan being cut off, and Americans thought this was a threat to their primacy in the Middle East or West Asia. Neocon means neoconservative. President Reagan was there in power in 1980. He wins the elections. Reagan believed in massive arms buildup as well as Star Wars, strategic defense initiative. For the first time till now, if you see the entire nuclear doctrine, it was always defensive. For the first time, nuclear strategy becomes offensive, meaning you can fight a nuclear war and win it too. So many people thought this was totally insane. It was mad. So US economic and military superiority. US in Grenada, there is an invasion by US in 1983. Libya, 1980, shooting down of a South Korean airliner by the Soviet Union, and NATO training exercise. Literally, many people believe that the world is on the brink. But what was a saving grace? Soviet leadership was old and ill health after Leonid Brezhnev. Brezhnev dies in 1982. Yuri Andropov comes in for a short time, and so does Konstantin Chernenko. Now the end of the Cold War. Most of you know Mikhail Gorbachev takes over. Then you have the Chernobyl incident, one of the worst nuclear accidents in history. And reforms, he brings in reforms. Perestroika, which is a policy of economic, political and restructuring. Troika means three. Glasnost and a policy of openness in public discussion. There is an attempt by him to reorder superpower relations. Important summit meetings since 1975 and 1980. 1987, Reagan and Gorbachev signed the Intermediate Forces Treaty, which is indeed the first treaty which removes middle-level nuclear weapons. Now, if most of you see, the breakdown of the Berlin Wall is seen as symbolic as the end of the Cold War. The Berlin Wall was, most of you know, concrete barrier that physically and ideologically divided Berlin from 1961 to 1981. Construction of the wall was commenced by the German Democratic Republic, that time East Germany, on 13th August 1961. The wall cut off West Berlin from surrounding East Germany, including East Berlin. See, this is an image that you can have a look where it was broken. On June 12, 1987, more than 25 years after the Berlin Wall first divided the cities east and west, US President Ronald Reagan gave a famous speech in front of the Brandenburg Gate, which was built by the Prussian Emperor at the gates of the entry into Berlin, challenging his Soviet counterpart Mikhail Gorbachev, saying that Mr. Gorbachev tear down this wall. So the Berlin Wall, please remember, as I told you, it separated East Berlin. It was not only a physical, it was an ideological division between Eastern communism and Western democracy. The fall of the wall was on November 9th, 1989, as the Cold War began to end in East Europe. And as most of you know, most of the Eastern European countries announced a change, and as well as East Berlin's Communist Party announced a change in its city's relations with the West. Starting midnight of the day, it said citizens of the German Democratic Republic were free to cross borders. And after that came Soviet dissolution. The USSR itself, glasnost weakened the ideological bonds that held the Soviet Union together. And by February 1990, with the dissolution of the USSR looming, the Communist Party was forced to surrender 73-year-old monopoly on state power. At the same time, the Union's competent republics declared autonomy from Moscow, with the Baltic states withdrawing from the Union entirely. So Gorbachev used to keep the Baltics from breaking away, but it did not. There was a failed coup. A growing number of the Soviet republics threatened to secede from the USSR. Then the USSR formed what is called the Commonwealth of Independent States, which was created on 21st December 1991 as a successor entity to the USSR. And if most of you see, officially dissolved on 26 December 1991. George H.W. Bush became very emotional and he said, by the grace of God, America won the Cold War. And he declared a new world order. Please remember, this is the changes in national boundaries. The red shows you the old Soviet Union and the blue shows you the present inherent state, Russia. Still, it is the largest state, land-wise and territory-wise. Now, there were close encounters. The Cold War and the history of nuclear weapons are very close. Bipolarity and nuclear weapons, like Kenneth Waltz tells you, go hand in hand, and they did give for stability. Deterrence 1961, as I told you, Berlin, airlift, you had that. 62, Cuba and Indo-Chinese War. 73, the Arab-Israeli War. A very important war where Israel was attacked by the Arab states. 1853, the exercise Able Archer, where many people believe this NATO exercise could have led to the third. So please remember, the Cold War was a period of geopolitical tension between Soviet Union and the United States of America, between the Eastern and the Western Bloc after World War II. Many people believe that it lasted from the Truman Doctrine in 1947 to 1991, the dissolution of the Soviet Union. So the Cold War for us becomes a very important chapter of international history, where most of you should remember that the present theories, many of the theories of neorealism, looked at this period very positively and thought that this was a period of stability. Kenneth Waltz even thought that a post-Cold War world will be extremely unstable compared to this period of peace. Thank you. I'll see you in the next lecture.